Hear any stories of anything supernatural happening?
No, I'm glad you asked that question, Mikey.
Yeah, because I remember hearing you say something.
I've never seen a dead body up close.
Yeah,
Seen quite a few dead bodies.
What about you?
I've seen one.
Yeah, me neither. No, I'm the same boat as Scotty. Nothing.
I mean, I've only been to a funeral where they had an
Well,
open
yeah.
casket, so that was probably the closest I've been to a
Sure.
dead body, but I've never seen somebody like on the street or in the real world not living.
Yeah, I don't think I have.
Yeah, it almost seems unreal when it's in a box and it's made up and they look like they're sleeping or like a mannequin or something. But yeah, I'm sure it's. So I think when you see stuff like that, it's so detached from our minds. Like you don't even comprehend what's going on. Like I remember actually when I was growing up, I used to watch some of those like Face of Death movies and stuff, and I remember seeing them cutting off the hand of somebody, and it being on the ground, it looked like a Hollywood prop. It looked fake, but it was like it's real. It looks fake because we don't see body parts off of people. So I'm sure if you just saw somebody on the ground like that, it almost doesn't even compute what you're seeing, really, right?
Yeah, the reality is that, a dead body or many dead bodies is coming to a city near you. I mean,
Yeah.
This is just the day and age we live in, is that when death becomes overwhelming, the normal process to deal with that death is interrupted. Like you can't have a funeral because there's hundreds of thousands of dead bodies in the street.
Wow.
So now it becomes just a problem of sanitation more than anything. How do we get these bodies taken care of so they don't cause problems?
I wonder if like movies play into that you just, you kind of just, I've seen lots of movies where they portray these things, Holocaust type movies. But yeah, it's a whole different ballgame when you see that in the real.
Yeah, I was picturing like the Holocaust and stuff. They just had mountains of bodies that they just got to get them out of the way.
Yeah.
Wow.
And it seems like there's natural disasters everywhere. I mean, obviously what happened in Turkey has happened before, A lot of people lost their lives in that tsunami that wiped off all those beach towns and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, the destruction is getting bigger and gnarlier, and it's harder to cope and harder to manage.
So where did this happen? Where did you see this?
So in Turkey, this is the recent earthquake that happened in Turkey. This was towards the beginning of the year, and it was a pretty significant quake, in multiple locations that they had these earthquakes. And unfortunately, I think there was 10 cities in Turkey that were affected.
Wow.
And that doesn't even include Syria, which, if you know, Syria is in the middle of a civil war right now. So that was the real sad part, is that all the focus was on Turkey, and there was like zero focus on Syria, because that's like the hotbed of ISIS and terrorism. And so, I mean, when you're a terrorist nation or a terrorist hotbed, like when you need help,
No help is coming.
no help is coming.
People are afraid.
Yeah, that's weird. I didn't hear anything about Syria.
Yeah. Aleppo's not too far from Hatay, which is the ancient city of Antioch, and that was one of the cities that was pretty devastated. And Aleppo was devastated by this earthquake as well. But again, it's just people's minds. It's too dangerous to give help in an area where they're already fighting, back and forth.
So real quick, just in case somebody doesn't know who you are or what you do, why are you over there? What are you doing over there?
Yeah, so we operate a small little disaster response team called the Gideon Rescue Company, and the simple answer is we go where God sends us.
Amen.
And so we know that these disasters are increasing because of what we read in Matthew 24, that disasters are going to come right on the heel of each and every one, and earthquake specifically is listed biblically, that we're going to see earthquakes in diverse places. And we haven't had a large-scale earthquake in a while, actually. I think we had a few minor ones throughout the past years or so, but it's been...
Are you talking U.S. or worldwide?
Just worldwide. In terms of like large loss of life. I think the last large loss of life earthquake might have been Nepal, where we had, if you remember Kathmandu, there in Nepal, we had quite a big earthquake there that killed a few people.
In the U.S., it was probably San Francisco.
That would have been at the turn of the century in 1900s. Mm-hmm.
Is that the one where you see the bridge?
We were kids, but it only knocked down a couple things at the bridge, and
Yeah.
I think that happened in the 80s, maybe 90s. I don't remember exactly, but
Yeah, earthquakes are scary, because the structures that man has built become very vulnerable, especially when you're multi-storied. And that was no exception in Turkey, is that, you have really heavy concrete structures maybe not quite the same coating that we build even here. But it's not just the magnitude, it's also the time that it shakes. So given, you can have a small magnitude, but if it shakes for a long time, it doesn't matter what kind of building you have, it's going to sustain damage or come down.
This one shook for 2 minutes.
Yeah, it was a long time.
And I think the average one is how many? 30 seconds to like 60 seconds or something like that. So it's almost 3 times longer than anything else. So you can imagine stuff just crumbles to flat at that point.
Yeah. And it happened at 4 o'clock in the morning.
Always.
So that was
Always.
that was the challenge too, is that everybody's asleep in their bed, and you can imagine waking up in the middle of the night and being disoriented, and not knowing, okay, what's going on? The house is shaking. Okay, it's an earthquake.
Dressed.
Can you get out?
Now I got to get out.
Where do
and
you
get to the
go
door.
if you don't have a light?
Yeah. So I mean, that's why it was so deadly. And I know that they've only put the death toll maybe at 40 or 50,000. I think is what they officially is recorded. But speaking of bodies, when we were there, there were bodies literally everywhere. I mean, the stench was in the air. And so it wasn't, and when, people are telling you, I've lost 80 people that I know personally, like family members, friends, and that's just one person in a city of 2 million. Do the law of averages. You're not just 50,000 dead. We're probably in the hundreds of thousands, if not higher.
And they only count you dead if they find you.
Yeah.
So there's probably a lot of people in the bottom of the rubble, and they're not counting that because it's not recovered yet.
How long ago did this happen?
This happened in, I want to say it was, and all these disaster responses blend together. I think this was March. I think it was March.
So about 2 months, and
March.
it's still.
No. I'm sorry. I think this was February.
Whoa.
Now, just for those of you guys that are watching, Brock's ministry, Gideon Rescue. Brock's my brother, by the way, if you didn't know that. He's been on our show before, but I'm so fascinated with your ministry because you have all these people that you work with spread out all over the U.S. pretty much. And when you band together and go over to these disasters, you're over there relatively quick. Like you're able to form together. So from the time that the earthquake happened to the time that you went over there, how close were you to the beginning of that?
I think the earthquake happened on a Sunday morning. It might have been Monday morning, and we were en route by Thursday. So
I mean, that's pretty fresh.
That is pretty
there
fast.
was a few days lapse there. We could have been quicker on pulling the trigger, but one of the things that actually held us back was, for the first time, we've actually had these search and rescue dogs, which are such a blessing. These are dogs that are like $50,000 that God gifted to our team. We had 3 of them available for this particular response, and so we had 2 handlers, 3 dogs. And we knew that the dogs were going to, if we could give anything, over there and help, in terms of help, the dogs would be the most needed. Just because these dogs are incredible. I mean, they can smell human beings, whether you're dead or alive.
They know the difference whether you're dead or alive. Okay.
Yeah, and they're trained. There's different trainings. These dogs are actually trained for cadaver and live find, which made it a little more challenging because there was so much death. So it was hard for the dogs to distinguish, But at the same time, I think God's hand was over the trip, and they were able to really, pinpoint in different locations, the people that we were looking for. And our handlers had some incredible testimonies of seeing people being pulled out of the rubble just because the dogs were like, it's right here.
Do they? I know they have good hearing. Do they hear stuff too?
It's not so much hearing. It's really their olfactory capability. I mean, human beings, we've got way more taste buds. They have like 4, So it's like
that's what they can eat vomit.
That's right.
Don't taste it.
But when it comes to smell, they knock us out of the park every time. Like they say, if you put a cake like in a football field, they can smell not just the cake. They can smell every ingredient in the cake for 100 yards, right? So they can distinguish the flour, the sugar, the baking soda, the salt.
Man, if you could teach your dog to cook.
So they can smell cocaine in the cake.
So they can smell the cocaine in the cake and distinguish it.
Wow.
And what's amazing too is that these dogs also know how to mentally check off when you're asking them to search. It's just a game to them. It's not. I don't know how much capacity they have for knowing, like, I'm in a disaster zone and I'm looking for people that are trapped. But to them, it's a game. When you say search, the way that they're trained is they're mentally checking off with all the smells. Okay, I see Mikey, I see Scott, I see Brock, I see Keith. But I don't see this other anomaly smell that's not here. And so that's what they're going after, is they're trying to find that one smell that's not there. Of course, in a disaster, you have thousands of people that are missing. They might be smelling.
What kind of dogs are they?
Mostly labs.
Okay.
Yeah,
labs.
mostly labs. They do have some other like Belgian Malinois and some other like hybrid, German Shepherds and other things they use as well. And you can use other breeds too. They have some golden retrievers. But labs are just that high energy, high drive. They're constantly wanting to perform. Yeah. So it was amazing. We got to the airport. This is the first time we've ever taken these dogs overseas internationally. That was kind of a big question we had, was like, how are they going to do? When we do our trips, there's not a lot of planning, and it's not that we don't believe in planning, it's just we don't have a lot of time. So like we're running off of a 2-day heads up, in a lot of this. And so we got to the airport, and we literally just walked in there in faith saying, we don't know how they're going to get these dogs on the plane, but we just believe God's going to open the doors. And as soon as we walked in the airport...
Yeah, because you can't just walk a dog onto the plane.
Yeah.
That's a complicated thing,
Right.
actually.
Yeah, it is, especially internationally.
Yeah.
So when we walked with the ticket agent, they were like, oh, okay, well, do you have crates? Can we put them below the plane? And
Didn't think about that part.
Yeah, we did. Well, we didn't think about it, but also one of our handlers, she's like really like, she doesn't do that,
Yeah.
So she was like, I'm not putting my dogs on the plane. So they said, okay, let's talk to a supervisor. So they call a supervisor, and they come back and, a few minutes later and say, this is amazing. We've never seen it work out so easily, but you guys are allowed to take your dogs on the plane,
Now, was it because they knew what you were doing, or?
Partly, yeah. I mean,
Awesome.
that's a big part of how the doors open up, right? When people are in need, all that bureaucratic red tape that keeps us from things disappears, And so it's pretty incredible. I have a short little video here. These guys, in the plane, these dogs were like literally rock stars,
let's take a picture.
We're in the back of the plane. The stewardess literally have them in the galley, like the food galley, which is probably not like super clean,
Yeah, right.
And, and they're petting them, they're taking pictures of them. They're like pulling steak out of the the food and giving them like little morsels of steak and treats and whatever. And the dogs were just loving it, And it was just pretty incredible. We didn't actually, our handlers didn't. They were really worried about them going to the bathroom, on the plane. It's like 12. It's a 12-hour flight from.
Yeah.
So the dogs
what do
were
you do in
in
that
the
case?
plane.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're in the plane, just riding in the back like everybody else, like a passenger in a seat.
Whoa, I've
What do
never
you
seen
do?
that.
Take them in the bathroom? Sit on the seat here.
Dude, we didn't. No, they held them back from eating like food the day before, so they put them on a
nothing
fast.
in their system.
And then they also limited their fluid intake just to dehydrate them a little bit. But man, it was a miracle. 12 hours, not a single accident.
Wow.
And as soon as we landed and got in the airport in Istanbul, they just like went all over the floor.
Yeah.
In the airport?
So, yeah, in the airport. And in the airport, they were like, "No, don't worry about it. We'll clean it up. No big deal." Because they know you're there to help.
Aww.
Like they were excited. So it was
Clean up at baggage.
yeah, yeah, clean up and baggage. So it's really amazing. On the flight over there, it's always incredible to us how we see how God just orchestrates these divine appointments. And of course, we have the dogs. It's a big magnet. And this guy walks up to us, and he's on the right there with the beard. And his name is Oktay, and he's actually from Turkey, and he's flying back to like help his family. He's trying to look for his mother-in-law who's missing.
Oh, wow.
And he sees the dogs, and he sees our team, and he says, "Man, can you guys help me?" And we're like, "Well, yeah, sure." And he says, "Okay, I know exactly where to go, the neighborhood, the place." He's like, "If you guys can help me look." And it was just an incredible done. We prayed with him right there. And he's from a total Muslim culture. Like,
I was going to ask how the religious.
Yeah. Turkey is a very it's a very Muslim country. It's maybe more modern in a lot of ways because it's a part of the European Union. But and there's a lot of secularism in the country. But if you're going to default, into the Muslim culture and that thinking.
It's interesting because historically, that's where the 7 churches are.
Yeah.
They're all in Turkey.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, and what's incredible is that where we were headed, Hatay, is the ancient city of Antioch. It's the first place in the Bible in which we have the term Christians.
Where people are called Christians.
Where people are called Christians was in Hatay, in Antioch. So that's where his mother-in-law is from. So here we are, out of all those 10 cities that are devastated, God is sending us to the ancient city of Antioch. Wow. And it's just neat, like all of a sudden, all of these details start falling into place, and Oktay is like, "I got this, I've got the contacts, I've got the place where we're gonna stay, like don't worry about it, like we'll hook it up."
So he approached you just out of the blue, like, what are you guys doing?
In the plane.
Wow.
In the plane. We even, on that flight, we even had a medical emergency where some poor guy was dehydrated, and we had to like resuscitate him, give him fluid, and like start an IV and everything, which even gave us greater favor with the airlines, because they were like, "Oh, like you guys helped us, thank you so much. Like we wouldn't have known what to do without you guys on the plane."
Yeah, because if you're over the ocean, it's like you're 50% there.
Yeah.
What are you going to do? Turn around? You can't just turn around. I mean, if you have a medical problem in the middle of the ocean, that's a problem.
Yeah, it was a big deal, and it was funny because we were trying to search throughout their whole kit, because they have a whole doctor's kit with like medications and translating, but they're all in Turkish.
Oh.
You can't read them, you know. So it was like, well, you know,
Yeah.
I think that's fluid. It looks like
Google Translate.
Yeah.
Pull out the
Yeah,
Clear.
yeah,
Here, you
seriously.
drink it
Seriously,
first.
Google Translate's amazing. We use it a lot.
So when you fly over there, you don't have like an Airbnb or something. Like you don't know where you're gonna stay.
No idea.
They don't even have a plan, which is beautiful because God has opened up these doors all the time, and you get a chance to see how God works.
Amen.
Yeah, I mean, literally, we just know that we're getting on a plane. And we don't even know if we're getting the dogs on the plane, right? Like, that's step one. And then as the dogs are on the plane, then you know, like, hey, God's opening doors, so he must be sending us, you know? And then it's like divine appointment, divine appointment, divine appointment. Like, you know, like, you're in the right path because you're just meeting all these people. So
That's awesome.
Here, that's a picture of us working on the guy in the plane, you know, giving him some fluid and resuscitating him. So it was awesome. It was a great way to start the trip. And again, more pictures. They're so excited. As soon as we landed in the airport, they said, hey, where do you guys need to go? And we were like, well, we're trying to get to Antioch. And they were like, okay, follow us. We're going to take you to the manager's office in, you know, Istanbul. Wow. So they whisk us through security, whisk us through all these things, get us through, and they literally put us on flights out of Istanbul directly to Adana, which was close to, you know, maybe few hours, 4 or 5 hour drive from Hatay, but better than 16.
That was as close as they could get you.
That was as close as they get us, because the airport was closed.
Well, yeah, because you think if everything is destroyed, how do you even get into the middle of the thing?
Yeah.
That's a problem.
Yeah, it is a problem. Yeah. Logistically, all of these things are a problem. The disasters are a big, giant puzzle.
Yeah.
Like just trying to plug in pieces and make it work, you know. And so it was a blessing. So, and what was amazing was that here we are landing in Adana. When we got on this flight in Adana, this was really a testimony to the Muslim mindset of hospitality and grace. Because when we got on the plane from Istanbul to Adana, they actually had to ask over the intercom. They said, are any of the passengers going into this affected area, are they willing to give up their seats for this search and rescue team and the dogs? And it wasn't a demand, cool. It was a request. It was like, are you willing to give their seats? And you got to think about it. Like, all these people are going into the affected zone to find family, to find friends, to try to help, or you know what I mean. And it's a real emotional and trying time. And they all gave up seats so that we had a spot on the flight. I mean, it was amazing. It was humbling. It was like, wow. I mean, Middle Eastern hospitality is second to none. And I think that's what gets lost, like, unfortunately, like, you know, in our world, especially in the Western world, is that we get so pumped full of hate and vitriol against, you know, the Muslim culture that you don't realize that, man, there's a lot of beautiful cultures and people out there that are not what is portrayed in Hollywood or in the movies, you know? They're not all suicide bombers.
And I think that works.
Yeah.
I think that works on both sides of the fence too, because their view of us is that we're just these infidels and all we care about is our, you know, bling bling money and this and that. And here's a group of people that are spending their own money, their own time, coming over to help them in their time of need. I think that's actually neat.
Yeah, in fact, that actually was mentioned to us when we were there. They said specifically that if you are born in the United States, automatically you are a Christian. in their mindset. So in the Turkish mindset,
like,
if you
we
were
think
born
they're
in the United
terrorists.
States, you are a Christian.
But a certain kind of Christian.
A Christian that eats pork and smokes and cusses and watches
drinks
movies.
And watches whatever.
What kind of Christians do that?
A lot.
Different show. Different show.
Yeah, but no, it's true. Like, the media that we have here really negatively impacts our image around the world. And this is all they see. You're exactly right. Like, what they look at us, they look like, man, these guys are from Hollywood.
But the same.
They're not faithful to their spouses. They're not, you know, it's like,
it negatively impacts our view around the world too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think the majority of people either think Christians are a mega church or Catholic.
Yeah.
One of those two.
Yeah.
And that's been the case for a long time, because, you know, like, whenever there's war, like in the U.S. between another country, well, they're automatically, you know, evil. I mean, you think about, like, World War I, World War II, right? Propaganda machine goes to work.
That's right.
The dirty communists.
And it's the leadership, it's not the people.
And I think, unfortunately, you know, that the false, you know, idea about grace within Christianity has done a lot of damage around the world, because people view Christians as very loose when it comes to morals, because they're just like, well, God's going to cover it, you know, God's going to forgive me. And it's like, but there's accountability. Like, there's greater accountability in some of these other cultures than there is even in our own culture. And it's an interesting cultural exchange, you know, between the two groups. So here we are. We landed in Adana. There's teams from all over the world. It's amazing. We get to see, all these different groups. And that's what's really neat, too, about Disasters is it really brings together international communities.
Wow.
And so you get to meet cultures that you've never met before. A team from Serbia, and there's a whole Danish team there. And there was a team from Saudi Arabia. And so, just kind of a neat way to interact. And
Is that what you flew on?
They put you all in an air?
no, this is from the United Arab Emirates. Okay, so this is what they flew on to get there, right?
Yeah.
And so as we landed here, I remember they gave us a form. It was from the United Nations, and the form said, "Please list your team, your capabilities, what you can do." So I filled on there. I said, yeah, we got some dogs, and we got some medical skills, and then that was it. Like we didn't really have anything else. Like, we're not like amazing beyond that. And then there was one little section. Any other skills you have is like, the other box. And I checked it and I said, we have prayer.
That's cool.
And I submitted it to the United Nations, and they were, the guys that were taking it there, I don't know if they ever saw it, but it really, that's honestly how these trips are even successful. Because we have no idea what we're doing. Like we literally are just stepping on a plane with faith that God's going to get us there, that He's got a mission, that He's got a plan, and we think oftentimes so small when God wants to think,
Big.
Universal scale.
Yeah.
And so a lot of it is bathed in prayer. And so as we landed here, we recognized that, man, like we need to be praying. Like, Lord, what's the next step? How are you going to get us to Antioch? From Adana, do you want us to drive? And that's a 4 or 5 hour long drive journey, all the way there, traffic blocked and, trying to get in there. Or do you have a more direct route?
And can you even just rent a car?
Yeah. And being on some of these trips before, I've always kind of seen how God has just always had, He has the direct route, right? Like God doesn't waste time. Like when He needs the mission completed, He's going to send the right tool, Like if Elijah needs to be taken to heaven, He sends a fire chariot. Philip needs to be transported, it's like, it's done, And so there is a sense of urgency. And so I was looking at the airport, and I told Dylan, I said, as we're walking out on the tarmac here, I was like, hey, there's got to be helicopters somewhere around here, right? Like that'd be the most direct route in human speaking. And so we literally walked around, saw these big planes. There was no helicopters until way across the tarmac on the other side, there was a little Coast Guard station, like a Turkey Coast Guard station. So we literally show up at this Turkey Coast Guard station and had gotten a ride over the little airport security guy, like.
I mean, that's pretty amazing in itself that you even got a chance to go over there. Like, I don't think I've been to lots of airports. I don't think I could walk over and naturally be like, I want to go to that building over there, and have somebody take me to the building.
It's a combination of just being bold and not knowing what you're doing, and walking into the office, the security office, and saying, hey, through Google Translate, we need to go over here.
I mean, that's even more miraculous.
And the other teams are like doing their own thing.
Yeah,
you're just kind of trying to find your own way.
Yeah, the other teams are all there trying to arrange rides, and they're trying to rent cars. Like we had heard that you couldn't even rent a car in Adana because everybody's there trying to rent a car. Yeah. So like transportation was a big problem. And we walked over there, and the security guy, he was funny. He was like, yeah, just give me a minute. He did a few little duties, got his little car. We hopped in the car. We drove across the tarmac. And I'll never forget, man, it was just kind of a surreal moment. Here we are in the car actually driving across. And here we are pulling up to the helicopter base, and it's like, not only do they have one helicopter, they got like 6 helicopters all up front. And so it's like, hey, like we're in a good spot, right?
What about those?
If we need a ride, it's just, all it is asking somebody for a ride, And,
are you kidding?
And so we walked in and we met the commander, and we explained our situation to the commander, and he said, yeah. He said, I think we can help you out. Hold on. Let's
this is like the guy that goes in and asks the king for something, right? And he asks for the kingdom, keys to the kingdom. Yeah. And the guy's like, you can't do that. You can't do that. It's like the answer is always no until you ask. Yeah. Look at that.
Yeah. Well, a principle that we've really been able to put into practice in our ministry is from Joshua's experience. Like, I'll give you everywhere where you place the sole of your foot.
Wow.
So literally, like, if we have that boldness to know that God's with us, then man, place your feet boldly, plant them boldly, say, hey, I need this, and chances are God's going to work on that person's heart and be like, you know what, you're right. Like, how can I help you?
Because God wants to save people.
Yeah.
He's in the business of saving people. Yeah. So this is definitely in line with what He wants.
Yeah, so we're talking to these guys, interacting with these guys, sharing with these guys. We gave them patches. They gave us patches. We gave them some glow tracks, the whole thing, It's like, and this is in a country we're not supposed to be able to share literature.
Because these are Muslims.
Yeah, they're Muslims. And not only that, they're government Muslims, right?
Wow.
So like, if you're going to get in trouble, it's probably with these guys, But yet they see a common bond. Like they naturally ask questions.
Yeah.
Because they're like, well,
Who
how
are
in the
you?
world? Yeah, how'd you get here? And who are you? And what are you doing? And what is this about? And so you get a chance to share, like, genuinely, like, hey, like, our God is amazing, and He brought us here for.
Awesome.
I
Now.
think it's why Jesus chose the main method of His ministry, really to help people, heal with them, because it breaks down all cultural lines. Literally any sort of I don't know what you call it, racism, for lack of a better term, in that day. That's what this really is. And you're helping somebody. It's like, think about that. That dissipates all natural resistance because you're this person from this other country.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what's amazing about a disaster, is that it spares no culture, it spares no religion.
Yeah.
Right? So it doesn't matter whether it's North Korea or whether it's Southern California.
I would love to go to North Korea.
If
there's ever a disaster, I'm on the plane with you.
Yeah, okay. I'll hold you to it. So here we are, talking. They have this nice, awesome police helicopter. It's the commander that we're talking with here, Dylan and I. Dylan's one of the guys that was on the trip with us. And then what was funny is that they actually passed us off, and we didn't know this. Like, they said, yeah, sure, give us till like noon. I think is what they told us. Noon. We'll have a helicopter ready. We'll pick you up. And then I get a call on my cell phone, because I'd given them my number. I get a call on my cell phone, and it's like, hello, my name is John Smith, and I'm with the United States Air Command for, the Turkish mission here, and I heard that you need air support. And I was like,
Whoa.
well, I was like, that'd be nice. I was like, well, we were actually talking to the Turkish guys, and they were going to provide help. He's like, well, I think they passed you off to me. And I said, sure, okay. And he said, what do you need? And I said, this is our team. This is how many people we have. This is how many dogs we have. He said, done. He said, I'm sending you the helicopters you need right now. And so literally
From America.
from the United, compliments of Uncle
States
Sam.
government.
Yeah, Air Force. So this is U.S. Army.
Turkish
I
government's
need
like,
to
yeah,
hang out with you more,
just
dude.
ask the Americans.
I'm stuck in an office in a boring computer. This guy's out there. Like, this is amazing.
So what shows up in this video, as you see, is that here we are riding, and when we look out the window here in a second, you're going to see, like, they sent us literally the Blackhawks, right? Like the U.S. Army Blackhawks that have landed, 2 of them, not just 1, 2 of them, for us to load our entire team on.
I mean,
it was just,
honestly, I just want to ride in the thing.
yeah, it's amazing.
Wow.
Why is the military not doing this?
Yeah.
They're just like, we'll give you a ride.
Well,
I'm going back to
the logistics. Here's the crazy thing about it, is that those dogs are such special assets, right? Like, that doesn't doesn't just show up. I mean, when you show up with dogs,
Doesn't matter how much money you have, there's time it takes
it's
to
like
train them and everything.
So people realize that these dogs are very valuable assets. So that was our calling card in a lot of ways, with the military here. And these guys are awesome. I mean, they were our own United States military. They loaded us on the helicopter. It was about an hour and some change flight across the bay.
That's cool.
I mean, I think they're burning $1,000 a minute, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but it's like, how much is a life worth?
Yeah.
But I mean, like, it's impressive that they would do something like that. That's cool.
And the thing I think is really cool is it's like it's kind of like what's in it for them.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, maybe Turkey's an ally, maybe it puts them in good graces governmental-wise, but we're much bigger militarily and economically and all that than they are. So.
Yeah, and to the credit of our, just that spirit that we have in the United States, like, I think most U.S. citizens and even our military desires to really help when it counts. You know what I mean? Like I think at the heart of what people want to do is they want to help when they can. And so, these guys, they probably see some pretty awful tours and pretty awful situations. So to actually be on the side of doing something that's good and valuable, saving life instead of taking life. I think that's attractive. And the Bible says every good gift comes down from above. And that's what's amazing, is that in a crisis or disaster moment, it doesn't matter if we've had beef for 20 years with each other. Like, if I see your family hurt or I see you hurting or whatever, the natural tendency, and I think the way God has designed us as human beings is to have compassion. Now, obviously, Good Samaritan, there's some that just would pass on by. But there are those that would stop and render aid and say, hey, this is a situation at the risk to my own safety. I'm going to help this guy. And so it's a biblical, concept.
Yeah, I have a guy that goes to my church, and he's always sharing stories of the emergency room. He's a nurse anesthetist. And he worked in a unit where, they would have guys that would shoot at the cops and stuff, and then they would get shot out or whatever. Then they'd come into the hospital, and they would have to work on them like you would work on the police officer. And their first and foremost thing to do is to save that life right there. And that's amazing that we do have that instilled inside of us.
Yeah, I think it's a protection in this evil world where life is so cheap and it is extinguished, that God has given humanity just that compassion, to like, hey, when someone's hurting, like it's hard to turn a blind eye.
And people that aren't like that, everybody kind of recognize there's something broken in that person's mind. Like they're not normal to just like kill people with no thought, no remorse, nothing.
Sociopath.
Everybody recognizes like that's just wrong.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So it was an amazing flight. And what was neat is, I have this picture here. What's neat is that Octai, right? Remember, Octai's with us, right?
So wait, this guy's just like, I picked the wrong group to hang out with.
No, seriously. He's literally trying to bug me the whole time as we're loading on the helicopter. He's like, dude, I got to talk to you. Like, how do you know these people? And I'm like, Octai, I can't explain this right now. Just get on the helicopter. Right?
Yeah, I don't know any of these people, but I know the guy that knows these people.
So it's like literally this is the witness to Octai, right?
That's awesome.
So from his Muslim mindset, all of a sudden, this whole paradigm is beginning to shift where he's saying, whoa, like who are these people that claim to know God?
That's amazing.
And that when they ask, God answers,
Wow.
right? I mean, what does that do? Like for anybody who's seeking religion, I think that's the biggest thing that we want to know as human beings. Does it work?
Yeah.
Like if you claim that Buddhism really works, does it work? Like, do you reach nirvana? Like do you have some connection that nobody else has that puts you in a state of mind that you can flow through this awful life in a better way than I am?
Yeah.
Like that's the natural inquisitive, and so it's so amazing. Like Octai gets to see like firsthand, like, wow, like this God that they're talking about is alive.
Yeah.
And he's
Buddha
moving.
can't get you a Black Hawk helicopter.
No.
Right.
But God can.
No, no, it'd be a great T-shirt. So here we are. They landed us after the flight. They landed us in this field, just this big open field. Like we had no idea where we were. Good luck, guys. See ya. He literally just like dropped us off. And now the next step was like, okay, well, what do we do? And again, like prayer, like that's the way we start everything. It's like, all right, Lord.
Keep their phone number is what you do.
I did.
You gotta get out.
That's not even a thought that I thought about. Like that's a little scary getting dropped off in a location that's not easy to just go, okay, I'm done. I need to go home now.
Yeah.
Right. And but it is awesome because that whole crew, not only we couldn't speak to them because it was so loud. We weren't plugged in their same comms, but we had glow tracks. So the whole crew got, glowed up,
That's
and
so rad.
they got to know, like, hey, these guys are definitely different,
Leaving it in the Black Hawk helicopter, soldiers just sitting there waiting, going, wait, what's this?
Yeah.
Wow.
So it was, it's a blessing. Everywhere you go, there's opportunities, right? Because at the end of the day, God cares not only for the people of Turkey, but he cares about those guys flying that Black Hawk.
Amen.
You know what I mean?
He's working on everyone.
Yeah, everyone. Like the mission is universal, not the Coast Guard guys at the Turkey station, right? Everyone he's working.
He's working on your faith.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know how many times I've sat and I've listened to these stories and my mouth is always like wide open every time, but he's just like, yeah, of course we did this, and it's just like, what? Are you kidding?
It's totally normal.
Yeah. So we tried. We were kind of by this highway. We jumped up on this highway. And there's just like trucks and cars and everything passing along, and we're trying to flag down some sort of vehicle to like get into, Octai knows exactly where that neighborhood is, but we got to at least get to it now. So we have no transportation.
So you're really just hitching a ride?
Yeah, literally just hitching a ride, trying to find a truck or somebody. Couldn't get anybody to stop. Everybody's just blowing by us, just not even interested. And then one of our guys flagged down an ambulance, and we packed all of us in this ambulance. And what was awesome about it was that I hadn't thought about that actually the perfect vehicle for getting into a disaster zone would be
an ambulance.
An ambulance, right? And
the most direct route.
Yeah, the most direct route. So, and the reason is because you've got the little woot woot and the little lights, and it's like you can
people get off the road for you.
So you guys are flagging a truck, and God's like, no, I got something better. Hold on, just
Let them pass.
Yeah. So here we are in this ambulance, and I think this is the
lights and sirens. Straight through the checkpoints.
Yeah, you can hear Corey. Lights and sirens straight through the checkpoint.
Right? Yeah.
And it's funny because I don't think I've ever packed as many people, dogs, people, everybody inside this ambulance. And unfortunately, some of our team members got real sick.
Yeah, with no windows in that thing, I would be the one hanging my head out the back door.
Yeah. But God was good, and I don't think we could have been prepared for what we saw once we landed on the ground, ground zero. Now this is ground zero. This is like the destruction, and what I'm about to show you guys is like literally something out of a movie. The destruction is just, it's unfathomable. I mean, like, where do you start? You know, it's like
wow.
the rubble is everywhere, you know, and
What?
you know,
And it's already chained off.
yeah, you know, none of these places have been searched in the way that they should be searched for people. And it's just the hopelessness that's just on the street, and with the citizens and the people there, it's desperate.
Oh,
It's
wow.
desperate.
And it's not like there's like probably like bulldozers and stuff in abundance to remove wreckage.
Right.
And
Yeah.
rubble
So
and all that.
every piece of equipment becomes like
Yeah.
top priority, you know, used by those that have
Doesn't
money or
matter who-
influence or
yeah.
So I mean, it becomes a real desperate situation.
Commandeered.
And this is literally what we walked into when we were dropped off by the ambulance, was just a war zone. You know, I mean, it
Yep.
literally looked like somebody had bombed the city. And you know, this is where we're at now. This is where we're operating.
I cannot imagine what that was like seconds after that thing happened.
They had to have something, because it seems like there's at least a path, and you wouldn't expect the rubble to just like stop.
I'm sure that
basically
was
where the
priority
road
number one,
was.
right? Like in
Yeah,
the
you gotta
days,
get in and out.
in
Yeah.
the days before we got there, I'm sure one of their pieces of work was just to clear streets as much as they
That's
could.
A couple
you know?
days. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah, two or 3 days after the event. So it was really neat. Right away, we were able to get our dogs working. There were groups, and as soon as we see, you know, as soon as those groups see dogs walking through the streets, it was really hard, because where we got dropped off was probably a 1/4-mile hike to where this apartment building was, where Oktay's mother-in-law was, you know, buried probably, and that was just really tough, because every time you'd walk by somebody, they would be like, "Please, like, you have a dog,
Yeah.
like, please, like, will you search this building? I know my family's in here."
and he knows exactly where to go, even though it looks like
Yeah.
devastation. Because
Yeah.
I drove up to, I was in Red Bluff, you know, last weekend, and I drove down to Paradise, and I went to look for the place that I used to live. If I had not known the address, I wouldn't know where I was
Yeah.
at.
Right.
Crazy.
Totally
It was
changed.
like
Crazy.
totally different.
Yeah.
So that can be a difficult thing. Like,
Yeah.
even if you're familiar with the area,
Right.
like, I knew where I lived,
Yeah.
but no, I'd have had no
Is
frame
this-
of reference.
Is it still like all demolished, or are they building back up? Or?
They're building back up, but there's still whole sections where it's just like
Gone.
totally burnt down, totally wiped out. Like, there's nothing.
3/4 of the town is driveway, cement pad, nothing on it,
Yeah. Wow.
weeds. So it's like
Yeah.
you see all these driveways around, and they've cleared everything, but it's just like subdivisions of driveways. It's
So I can
the
only imagine,
craziest
like,
thing.
you're there,
Yeah.
and it's like you think you know where you're at because
Yeah.
of streets, but
Yeah.
it looks different. It
And
does.
Oktay had trouble with that. He had,
Yeah.
you know, he was disoriented and like, man, I think I know I'm on the
Yeah.
street, but I don't know. It's like, it's so
Yeah.
different and it's so changed. I can't tell you that this is right. So it took us a while.
Man.
But once we got there, the dogs got right to work, and you know, it's a real blessing, you know, to be able to see these guys work.
So how long before a dog found somebody?
It was that first day when we were already locating.
Like hours?
Yeah, we were already locating people as soon as we were on the ground. And the
praise
nice
the
thing
Lord.
about the dogs is that they're really mobile. So like they can, and it's just an indication, right? Like the dog can't tell you
Yeah.
positively that there's somebody here, but
Yeah.
what they can do is they can alert and they can say, yes, I smell a human here. And that gives the crews hope and a sense of direction to say, hey, we're going to keep digging on this site.
So, like, how dangerous is that to follow a dog? Like, if a dog finds a spot, like, how dangerous is it to get into some of these spots? Like, you probably don't even know that it's going to hold up.
So this is probably one of the more dangerous things I've ever done in my life, because you're exactly right. Is that everything has so changed, you know, like from an engineering standpoint, nothing's safe,
Yeah.
right? Like no engineer would look at that situation and say, I think you could be in there safely for a couple hours and nothing would happen.
You start clearing rubble,
You have
you
no
don't
idea.
know
I
what
know.
like
You
little
know-
stick it's
Yeah,
holding
you
it
have
up.
No idea.
And I'm seeing glass and
Yep.
wires,
Yep. Yeah.
live wire.
Yep.
I mean, I don't
yep,
know.
yep. It's a dangerous spot, and then we had aftershocks too.
So,
So
it's
that
still
was that
moving.
was the other.
So
you know,
it's
you-
still-
you would be in there, and then the earth would start moving, and these buildings are
That's
still
scary.
shifting. And so I mean, it was a dynamic situation. The dogs, of course, add some layer of protection because you can send a dog into a smaller space without you having to go in there,
Yeah.
spend that time in there.
So speak to that for just a second, because did you guys talk about this when you were there with your team? Like, hey, look, we're putting our lives at risk. If you go into this building, there is a chance you will not come out. Like,
Yeah, we had that talk.
wow.
We had that talk, and actually, it was prompted. One of our team members was there. He actually, it was great. I'm glad he did. He led the charge. He actually called his wife and said, "I'm gonna have this conversation with my wife first. I suggest you guys probably do this." And they talked about it as a couple, and his wife totally was like, man, if there's somebody alive in there, I'd say go for it. And so they agreed as a couple to say, this is worth the risk for us as a family. And he had kids, and so the same thing for all of us. Like I called my wife and we had the conversation, and we were agreed that this is worth the risk.
I mean, praise God that you have. This is why God honors this kind of stuff, is because you think about the gift that you're giving to those people. It's like you've already made the choice of life and death right there.
Yeah.
Even if nothing happens, you've already made that choice.
Yeah.
Well, and I think on a larger scale, I think we have to realize, like, if we believe and we have this hope, in Christ eternally, then who's at the greater risk for
Someone
an
that doesn't
eternity
know.
without Christ?
Someone that doesn't know.
Somebody doesn't know. So if I'm secure, then it doesn't matter what happens to me, right? I mean, like if the building, would it be awful for my family and having to pick up the pieces and but at the same time, like, what's the chances of reaching someone who doesn't know?
Wow.
So it's really reminding me of what it says in John 15. This is verse 13. Greater love has no man than this, than to lay one's down his life for his friends. And then he says, you are my friends if you do whatever I command you.
Yeah.
And that's it,
And the Gospel Commission, it's amazing about that. The Gospel Commission, if you think about it, like, there are no enemies in God's mind.
Yeah.
Like, everybody is open field for being his friend.
Yeah.
I think it's so beautiful that you're over there doing this. I mean, I try to think of this on the reverse side. I mean, would the Muslim faith send people over here if we had a big disaster?
I don't know. It's a good question.
I mean that's a fascinating thing to think of the dynamics of that on the other way around. I can only imagine what those Muslims observing you going and digging in that building must have thought.
I think this only works in Christianity, because I don't think only God can put that, only God can change the heart to where a person is willing to do that.
Right.
Like, it's not just any religion or any faith or any view of God. It's God transforming a person's heart to be like His, to have that heart of love that would do that. So maybe some would.
Yeah.
I mean, sure. I mean,
The Bible says for some, maybe a good man, some would die, right?
Yeah, but what about for your enemy?
That's impossible without God, man.
Possible. Yeah. Yeah, and you're exactly right. I think in all other religious systems, this concept fails or falls short.
Yeah,
because all other systems are not built upon the exchanging of one's life for another, but upon the preservation of your own self.
Yeah,
Right.
and at the risk, Christianity stands at the risk of sounding arrogant in that respect, but really it's to say, there's a whole lot of Christians aren't necessarily transformed.
Right.
Yeah.
It's only that transformed heart. It's only somebody that's completely transformed by Jesus that can do that. And that's where each one of us have to have that intimate walk. Otherwise, we're not that person.
Right.
And that's where God is trying to bring us to, is to become that person.
Yeah, naturally, it's a fight. Like, I know in my mind personally, it's a fight, because I'll be honest, like, I don't want to die.
Yeah.
I'm not, I don't have a death wish to die. But in the bigger context of the great controversy which we're facing between good and evil, like, I've been so blessed. Like, I have seen the hand of God. I've seen His goodness. I've seen His character. I know who He is. And if His choice was to lay me to rest, I would totally trust Him that He knows better than what I think. And in the end, it's going to work out even better than I would have ever imagined.
And what an amazing thought, to die doing something that you know is super honorable or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, to me, I would feel good if I woke up on the resurrection day and to look back, and even though I missed out on my kids getting married and whatever like that, I think that just simple thought of, like, I died serving God. I think would be a happy thought.
Yeah. I mean, it's all God's character, right?
I think being in a death like that, it's almost like martyrdom. That's a living witness in itself. Like, I'm always thinking of this story of the Rachel chick that was shot at Columbine. There was more people watching her funeral than Princess Diana. This is a girl at Columbine, Colorado, that nobody knew.
Right.
But when she died for her faith, now the whole nation knows who she is, and there was friends of hers that watched her along the way, saw her struggles, saw her boldness. She went from struggling to being very bold before she died, and then everybody was like, whoa, she really was like what a true Christian should be. So I think, you know, in her death, she made more of an impact because her life turned into this, her dad continued to go school to school and do this Rachel's Challenge thing. I mean,
yeah.
Some teenage girl in Colorado is now known nationwide in schools and this program. And you know, when she was alive, she told her dad, she said, one day I'm going to be on Oprah. And sure enough, when her dad got invited on Oprah, he turned around and saw a big picture of his daughter, and he just broke down, and every person in the audience was just crying. They had to shut down the cameras and stuff. And it's just like, she probably maybe would have never been on Oprah if she would have just lived out her life.
Yeah.
But because of how impactful that death was, you know.
Yeah.
So just trying to add to what you're saying, you know, like,
Absolutely.
if you were to die over there, what if that saved 1, 2, 3, 4 people's salvation, you know?
Well, and God works on the process of multiplication, right? You know, because nothing is ever wasted in God's plan.
Yeah.
So, you know, you think of all the great men in history who have given their lives for the gospel cause, and I wouldn't say a single one of them was a waste.
Yeah.
You know, that they gave something infinitely, you know, like it was Tyndale that, you know, prayed, Lord, open the eyes of the King of England. You know, and now
Stephen getting stoned.
And now we have the King James Bible, you know, the world over. It's just like, wow, what a gift. You know what I mean? Like, how many lives have been impacted because that man gave his life and prayed that prayer for his enemies, right? Like the king was the one that was killing him. And he was like, Lord, just like Stephen prayed. He prayed the same prayer. He's like, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do.
As they're throwing rocks at his head. I mean, it's really, truly amazing.
Yeah.
It's the same prayer that Jesus prayed. So going back to Keith's point, like the only way that this is even possible is if you actually are connected with that God of love, and you allow that same love to transform your life.
No.
And then others get to see that, and they get to have that same transformation if they choose. So that's the power.
So on the flip side of that, though, you know, what has God called us to do? For some, it is to risk their physical life in a very real way. But for others, you know, like Paul says, I die daily.
Right.
Right? And what are you supposed to do being buried and brought to life again? Jesus has a mission. You know, he says in Luke 19:10, for the Son of Man has come to seek and save that which was lost.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you don't have to put yourself in a physically dangerous situation. That's certainly one component and one way to do it. But there are multiple ways that can be done to seek and save those that are lost.
And when you align your will with the will of God, that's the will of God. So going into a random bunch of pieces of rubble, seeking and saving that which is lost is like, that's in God's wheelhouse. That's what he wants to do.
It starts with surrendering, like you said though, your will to God's. Like, what is God's will for your life? That's what you need to follow.
Well, and you know, we say this all the time. Each of us witnesses disasters daily, right? I mean, it could be the loss of a loved one. It could be a financial crisis. It could be a medical, you know, problem that somebody's struggling with. Like there are disasters around us all the time. Like it doesn't have to be large-scale Turkey, you know, with thousands of people dead or dying. I mean, just look around. I mean, you know, the homeless guy that we pass on the road that's struggling just to figure out what the, you know, true purpose of life is, you know. So there's opportunities to seek and save the lost on so many fronts. And that's what I love about God, is that God's people have an opportunity to really be involved in this work the world over. And if there are true committed Christians, you would see an incredible opportunity before us in reaching people that, man, do they just need hope?
Yeah.
You know, giving them hope.
Did you hear any stories of anything supernatural happening?
No, I'm glad you asked that question, Mikey.
Yeah, because I remember hearing you say something. I don't know if we ever did it on camera though.
No, so this is amazing, right? And this proves our point that God actually doesn't even need us, right? Take the human factor out of it. God doesn't need humanity if He chooses to use 1,000 different ways.
Yeah.
And they had this little boy that they pulled out of the rubble. We didn't pull him out, but it was very close. We heard all the stories around us. And this little boy was pulled out of the rubble. And he had been like, it was a while, 5 days maybe underneath the rubble, 5 or 6 days. Now, physiologically speaking, 2 days without water, you're in trouble.
Yeah.
So 5 days, double the time, you're really in trouble, especially as a kid, you know? And so, of course, the news crews were like, hey, man, like, were you hungry or thirsty? Or like, how did that work? You know, being trapped in the rubble for 5 days. And this little kid said, oh, no. He said, every day. He said, a man in white came and gave me a little food and a little water.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Whoa.
I mean,
You
if
know?
you think of the angelic presence that's there as well. I mean, you're working side by side with these angels that are also working on the preservation of life.
Right. And the devil's trying to take life, right?
Yeah.
So the devil's trying to literally entune people.
It's like
right?
this clash of light and darkness together.
Yeah. You are in the middle of a cosmic struggle between good and evil, life and death. And it's amazing. Like when God needs to step in, he steps in to preserve life, you know?
Probably didn't have a way to do this, but it would have been interesting to like check his levels.
Yeah,
Right?
seriously.
Yeah.
Right?
Is he telling the
he's
truth?
totally not
This kid's been
dehydrated.
drinking
Yeah, no,
I mean,
like-
just like have.
Yeah.
And I'm not doubting it at all. It would have been an interesting testament to other people.
Right.
Yeah, just in case there are any
right.
skeptics out there,
Yeah.
that's exactly what the Bible says. 2 men in white apparel came up. Why are you gazing? Like, that's how it always happened.
And
men in white apparel.
Yeah, what if he went like, oh, and by the way, I put the little white wafers in my pocket. You want one? Right here?
It's a manna.
You know. But you know, think about this too, from the Muslim mindset, a very dark country that does not know Jesus or the power of the gospel.
loving God.
Right? A loving God. And look how God is trying to reach this people. He's giving them evidence after evidence after evidence after story after story, preserving life where he can. Right? The devil wants to plunge them off the cliff into darkness, and God's saying, no, I have people here who are precious that I'm going to preserve. And so it's, you know, man, you know, it's such a crazy.
And it is interesting, the stories I hear of people that convert because they actually saw Jesus or something. It's Muslims.
Yeah.
They have a dream of Jesus. And
Isa.
I wonder if it's just because they're so close to the truth. You know, they believe in God, he's our Father. They actually believe in Jesus. They believe Jesus is coming back.
Yeah.
I wonder if it's just that, you know, there are no missionaries or whatever, and so God's like, you know, an angel, or I need to come talk to that
Remind
one.
me of that point, because as we come to it, Oktay had some incredible perspectives to share from the Muslim perspective, what he saw and the difference with just Christianity. And so, but it's
Awesome.
amazing. So here we are. You can see these buildings are absolutely pancaked. There's just not, and these are like 4-story buildings. You know, now they're 2 stories or 1.5. You know. And we came to this one site. This was one of the first sites we worked at, and this was a significant site because the lady at this particular house had lost like 5 children, including like her family members and stuff. And so like when she asked us to help her, of course, how can you turn down a plea to help somebody that's lost all their children, you know? So we stayed late into the night. We had a backhoe. It was great. We were using, the dogs had swept the area, but they didn't seem to really hit on anything specific. And so we spent just a lot of time working with this lady. She was obviously in just terrible grief, you know, losing her family. And you have to understand, in the Muslim culture, the body is everything. Their belief is that if you don't have the body, the soul wanders in hell until it can be reunited with the body. So if you have a body that's not anywhere, which is interesting about suicide bombing, but if you don't be able to collect that body, like it's everything. So so we had, of course, a real burden to just try to help this poor lady. And so here we are digging, and the tools, of course, that you have, I mean, like, look at that. I mean, like, you have rebar, you know, and like, how do you even untangle that rebar? Like, we have a jackhammer, right? And it's a pretty beefy jackhammer, but man, it's
barely doing
painstaking, like digging through this. You're literally digging through concrete with your hands, and literally one chip at a time, trying to get through. You get enough space that you can get the cutter in there, you'd cut the rebar, you'd make the hole bigger. I mean, this is literally how you would have to search these buildings if you thought that somebody was down below, you know, buried in the rubble. It was hopeless. I mean, like, you literally were up against just that feeling of absolute hopelessness, where it's like, God, unless you help us find these people, like, there's no way. So we stayed at a camp. We had our accommodations were pretty rough, but we stayed at this like little tent city that they had. They were having some refugees stay here, and we stayed right alongside with them. Just kind of, you know, pop-up tent cities here. And it was cold in that particular season. It was really cold. I think we were even below freezing a couple of the nights.
Wow.
And it was neat though. Like this was Sabbath morning. Dylan, he brought his harmonica, and here he is playing for us some awesome hymns. And our team is comprised of more than just the Christians that we have. We actually have a lot of Muslims that are part of what we're doing now too. So it becomes an incredible platform to just share the faith and the hope that we have and the beauty of the Sabbath. And just because it was Sabbath, it didn't necessarily end our work. It just changed the focus of how we ministered, right? Instead of the focus being about, we got to dig with our hands for the rubble, it was like, Lord, how can we minister to people? And so it was just really awesome how God brought us to these really powerful ministry points throughout the day on Sabbath, where in fact we tried to do a little bit of digging. We tried to get in there and jump in there, and it was funny. Every time we tried to on Sabbath, somebody else would step in with a tool and they'd be like, no, it's okay, I got this. Wow. So our team literally got this whole different experience where we were, resting and just ministering to people who were hurting. And this picture here, I'll never forget this gentleman. We were in his house. We had brought the dogs. He was so excited because nobody was there helping him. And we made a sweep with the dogs. They didn't find anything. And then all of a sudden somebody came with a thermal camera, and we were looking with the thermal camera, and we didn't find anything with the thermal camera. And in this particular house, there was a family in the next apartment over that were all crushed, and they were still visible. You could actually see them. They were crushed in the other apartment, and he was looking for his parents who were still missing, and they were in the next apartment over, and he couldn't hear them, he couldn't see them, we couldn't get to him at all. And he kind of just, as he realized that the cavalry had come and the cavalry was now probably leaving, because you can only spend so much time. That's the challenge, is you can't spend 3 days
your whole trip
searching,
for one person.
you know what I mean, for one person. As much as you want to, you have to move on. Maybe there's somebody more viable. Maybe there's somebody that's actually a little closer to being saved. So our resources have to move on. And I remember him coming out, and so our dog teams had left, and I just sat down next to this guy, and he spoke English. He was from Istanbul. And he just looked at me, he's just crying, and he said, even if I don't ever find my parents, he's like, I have hope. And he's like, you know why I have hope? He's like, because you guys and so many other teams have come from around the world to help me in my hour of need. He's like, it gives me hope. And I was just like, whoa. I was like, man, there's so much I wanted to tell him. It's like, I just want to I hugged him, and I gave him a glow track, and then he immediately opened up the glow track and he just started reading this glow track. And I think it was certainty in uncertain times, or something. he's just pouring over this glow track because, man, he's hurting. He's spiritually hemorrhaging, right? And he needs a spiritual tourniquet. And so, man, it was just it was so heartbreaking, but so heartwarming at the same time. It's just such a weird dichotomy, right? Wow, God's brought us here at this moment for this guy. But at the same time, man, we can't spend time here. We got to keep moving. So it's you just commit him into God's hands, say, Lord, be with this guy, and bring him to a more beautiful understanding of your character and who you are. And that was just, that was Sabbath, man, all day Sabbath. We were just ministering to different places. This guy in the middle here, I think his name was Mofat. He was from Turkey, but he was living in Germany. Again, amazing guy. He was his own family was missing, and he was sticking with us and helping us translate and helping to work, even though his own family was still missing, and he hadn't been able to see where his family was at. So we eventually sent dogs over to his neighborhood, and unfortunately his family was killed in the earthquake. But he's just unselfishly poured himself out. It didn't matter what was going on. And that's what we saw a lot. One of the guys that housed our team, he went to 8 funerals.
Wow.
In one day. 8 funerals for his family.
Wow.
And yet still found time at the end of the day to house our team, to cook them a meal, to wash them, to wash their feet, to help them clean up and everything. Dude, it was amazing, Wow. And this guy lost, I don't know, in our culture, if you attended 8 of your family members' funerals, if you would have the capacity to help a stranger that was needing a place to stay.
I would be sitting in the corner just how could you even get up off the floor?
Yeah. It's amazing. This culture has such incredible resilience and I think it's that ancient Abrahamic hospitality, right?
Yeah.
Wow.
Abraham was known for his hospitality, and praise the Lord, through his lineage, he's passed that down to these guys, and that's what's so awesome. It's beautiful. I think there's a lot that we can learn from their culture in that sense. We ended up, the last part of this whole story, we ended up in this building on Sabbath afternoon and this building was a 6-story building that was reduced to 3. So three stories that collapsed with a basement. And we found positive heat signatures in this building, and the dogs actually alerted on this building too. So not only did the dogs alert, but as we were digging this building, we found that there was some thermal imaging that actually showed us that there were people that were alive. And so immediately, like, the team sprang into action. The locals were there digging. It was just amazing feat. They'd already pulled, I think, 3 people out of this building alive that were just under one layer. And so here we are digging in this building, trying to help where we can. And of course, the digging is painfully slow, like you're pulling out one piece at a time. You were using kitchen pots to put rubble in, to then pass it up so somebody gets out, as we're digging in this building. And, again, a little bit of jackhammer, maybe a little bit of water to cut down on the dust, and then it's just piece by piece cutting the rebar. And we realized really quickly, like, our team was not set up for this kind of rescue. You know what I mean? Like, we're literally digging with our hands. And so our prayer request went up to God, please, you got to send us hands. You got to send us help. You got to send us like another team that's got more equipment, more experience, more skill, whatever. And it was awesome. God actually sent us. God sent us the French, and this guy. We're actually listening here. You could actually hear tapping in the walls. Like as you're listening with a stethoscope, you could hear somebody like tapping. Like we would tap, they would respond.
Like military French.
Yeah, no, this is a Turkish military Air Force guy, I think.
Okay.
But I think of this next picture here. Here's the thermal imaging. We have some thermal imaging here, and the heat signature, you can see that kind of the red is actually real distinct heat signatures of bodies. Of course, everybody's real excited that we found these bodies, huddled in this cavity or wherever it was,
Now, is that just an app on a phone? Did it actually
No,
work?
this is military-grade thermal imaging. The guy that's holding the machine is actually above. It has a kind of wand sticking out up above.
Yeah.
He's kind of holding the handheld. And it's it's probably a $60,000 unit, that they can actually look through concrete and walls and see heat signatures from human beings. They can see the other small. But it was awesome. Here comes the French, right? And it was really neat to have that support because these guys are like the best of the best the European Union could offer. Their full firefighter squad with all their equipment and all their leadership, and man, these guys were like military precision. Like they had a whole, and it was beautiful because we had been working hard. Like we've been working like this was 36 hours straight of us digging in this building, being awake, trying to help these people. And
now, what is this like?
This is a ground sensing sonar.
Oh.
So they set up the ground sensing sonar to try to see if they can get some other images as well. And so they had some positive feedback as well. And so just, of course, nothing's guaranteed, but all the indications are there that there's somebody buried alive, in this building, and the French were an incredible asset to the efforts. And it was great because it gave our team a rest. Like we were just full on ready to, take some naps because it was just intense, And
I imagine it's hard to, it gets 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock at night, and you're going, I need to go home and go to bed, but there's still people in there.
Can't go home.
So you pretty much, your sleep takes a back seat.
It does.
And then you just kind of are operating on fumes, which is...
There's a balance there, right? Because as a team leader in this, you have to realize that, man, you gotta be able to like give your team a rest. Here we are assessing the building. Of course, that was always the question was, is it gonna crumble? Is it gonna shift on us? Is it gonna fall? That was always a big concern. So we always were, looking at the dynamics of the building. We had a couple of tremors. I've never seen people run so fast in my life. Like I've never exited a building so fast in my life. You know what I mean? Like the building starts to shake, and you're like, man, I do not want to be in this building. And everybody runs out, jumping out, where they could go. And here's Dylan. He's totally exhausted, passed out on a backboard. Which if you ever slept on a backboard, it's awful.
Hard plastic.
But it was great, man. God sent us so many just neat characters. This kid in the middle holding our T-shirt, he's from Germany, and he had such a neat testimony. Like his German team, actually, like it was so overwhelming, and there were some political things going on. The German team just were like, nope, we're not going to be helping. We're going to have to just sit it out in the camp. And he was like, no, I didn't come all the way here to sit in some camp. He's like, I'm checking out. I'm no longer a soldier. I'm a civilian.
Wow.
And he literally just walks out of his camp,
Wow.
finds our team, and is like, how can I help?
That's
and
amazing.
it was awesome. And he was a great asset.
Because he could probably get in trouble for doing that.
Yeah, he was like a bricklayer, building engineer. Like he knew about buildings and stuff. So it was just a great asset to have. We had a team of Turkish miners that showed up. And man, if you know anything about digging underground, guess who has some skills?
Right.
some miners, right? They're like thousands of feet underground where things are really sketchy. And so they know how to shore things up. You know, like these guys, when they showed up on scene and there was some contention between the French and the miners, like the French were like, no, we don't need your help.
Yeah.
You know, like,
You go work over there.
yeah, you know, seriously, and it really made them upset because they're like, this is our country.
Right.
And to date, the French had pulled nobody out of the rubble alive. These guys had pulled like 36 people out.
Oh, wow.
So like the score was like 36-0.
Yeah.
You know, like these guys were like, let us in there,
And they're on
we'll
the
get
home
it done.
turf.
Yeah.
And the French were like, we don't want you in here. Like, you know, we don't know how you work. We don't know if you're professionally certified. You know, all these things. You know, and they were finally we were able to kind of be the mediator between the French and the miners. Like, look, you guys got to let these guys do something. Like, you know, like let them in there. So when they finally let them in there, dude, these guys dug faster and quicker than all of us combined. Like they were like moles. They were just like. You dig into the tunnel. But what was really crazy about this, this is one of their leaders.
French team,
You know, he was.
don't take my team.
He said, the French team don't take my team.
Building.
Yeah.
And my team
He's all
goes
frustrated.
away. But now they go away. Our team is in the building and work hard.
Yeah. So and Jesse says the French team was here. They didn't take my team, but now they left, and now it's just our team. He's like, we're working hard. You know? So there's cultural things too. You know, like they and there's a balance there because they see, you know, outside Western help is colonial. You know, and so you have to really be careful of that. And so we really tried to work with the locals where we could, and these guys were amazing. We had an awesome opportunity to pray with these guys, witness to these guys, and they were a blessing to have there. But the challenge is that every team that came eventually left. Like the French came, they said it's impossible. There's no way. There's no way. And the miners eventually got to the same point. They're like, we just feel like this building is way too unsafe. And I think this is part of the story that I still struggle with because, you know, it's like I could see how God was setting up this whole story, right? Like it goes from none of man's strength or input, and all of a sudden, like we get the French team, which is like the epitome of man's strength and input, and the Lord removes that. And then he gives us the miners, which is like, hey, we'll take them. Like, you know, second string, maybe they're even better. And then he removes them. And so it's like God was stripping us away. In fact, our dog team had to leave. They were all getting on their flights, getting ready to go home. And so we were up against the clock. Like our flights were literally like the next day. And that was the biggest challenge. Because like, what do you do? Like, you know people are in this building alive. Like, can you walk away from this building knowing that somebody's alive in there? And that was, oh man, it was just heart-wrenching because then the doubts come in, you know, like the French are like, well, we don't think anybody was in there. That's how they justify it. You know, like, we don't think anybody was in there, you know, like, so it was all false evidence, you know, and yet we knew like God had led us there for a reason, right? Like all these different things. And I can honestly say our dogs alerted. We brought them in for one last sweep in the basement, and our dogs literally went to this corner and they were just like, I mean, hardcore, like barking, like this is it right here. Like they were and then our dog team had to leave. And so that was, and man, this is where I really struggle because I should have just taken that on faith to say, okay, this is it. Like they're right here. Like if it's just Dylan and I and Luke, the three of us that are left and we're digging with our hands, let's dig with our hands and find it. But in a moment of weakness, I just, in my mind, I was like, you know what, I want a second confirmation. There's all these doubts out there. And so we had the Saudi Arabian team come and they brought their dogs, and it was really unfortunate because as soon as they brought their dogs, I knew I'd made a mistake because their dogs were like timid. They weren't as well trained. They were like eating trash in the rubble. They didn't want to perform. They're like, come on, get in there. And the dog was like, I'm not going in there, you know?
You
like,
can tell.
And so it was just, it was like, man, like I shouldn't have put any confidence in this, you know? And as soon as we were in there trying to reassess it, the building just began to shake, like pretty big tremor. And we all exited and we got out of there. And man, it was hard because, you know, part of our team was leaving. And so we took a break to just go say goodbye to a couple people. This was the lady that we actually helped look for her kids. We actually sent a team back. We found her kids. None of them were alive. They were all dead. And so we sent a team back to just help dig the bodies out of the rubble. And she was so thankful. Like as she was leading our team to the site to dig these children out of the rubble, she's yelling at the top of her lungs. And we're like, oh no, like what did we do? You know, like did we do something wrong? Did we step on some toes? And the translator's with us. She's like, no. She's yelling at the top of her lungs, look at these people whom you call infidels.
Wow.
Who've come from America. She's like, look at these people who've done more for me and my family than any of my Muslim family friends.
Wow.
Wow.
So even if you were just there for that message to be relayed to the people.
Right.
Yeah.
And like as she hugged us, she was crying on our shoulders, we're crying on her shoulders. You know, she's so thankful. She doesn't speak any English, you know. But she's just saying, I'm never going to forget you. Like, you guys have done so much more for me than I could have ever done for anybody else, you know? And it was just this amazing moment of the ministry of presence, right? Like, we didn't sit down and give this lady a Bible study.
Yeah, you just loved
You know,
on her.
we didn't like say, hey, like, this is the truth, you know? Like, we just were there for her. Like, in her hour of need, we were there for her. And man, we gained a friend. We gained a family member. You know, like, she's a family member now. Like, if we saw her, I guarantee you she would be like, that's my family, you know? Because they came for me in my hour of need. And so here she is, you know, just so thankful. Mike's telling her.
I wish I could bring more, but my heart will never close for you. And you will be in my prayers.
He said, sorry, you guys did way more than what you should have done already, so thank you so much. Go ahead.
You know, and pain, man, you know, I don't know how the world can cope with this kind of death and destruction without the view that we hold. You know?
How hopeless life would seem, I think, if you just had nothing, and not a bigger picture to give you that sense of hope, you know?
Right. You know, and in the context, we've thought about this a lot for the people that are buried in this building, you know, is, so what if we could have rescued them and pulled them out? Like, would it have been an incredible testimony? Yeah, it would have been amazing. You know what I mean? Would have been like, whoa, so cool, God helped us find these people, you know, like, but at the same time, you think about, but now they have to continue living in a world that's so evil, with death and destruction, you know? And I'm not, maybe we made the wrong decision. Maybe we should have persevered in faith. You know, I'm not saying I'm beyond, you know, having a weak moment of like, man, we should have just like knocked and kept on knocking, asked and keep on asking. But at the same time, like, God in his mercy can work with even our failures and even every situation, because he's faithful. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter what happens, God is faithful. Like, that is a fact of life. Like, there's never a moment in which God is unfaithful. He's faithful. And so, like, in his mercy, he can lay someone to rest and say, it's okay. I'm going to come pick you up in a minute. You know? And that's the hope that we have, right? Like, on resurrection morning, there are going to be people who are going to be raised to life because Jesus is going to call them forth from the grave. And man, they rest now from this awful world in which we live. I mean, I don't think you could poll tons of people on the street. Like, if people were really honest with you, can anybody say this world is just a peach?
Wow.
You know, it's just like, man, like especially in these situations when you see so much death and destruction, like, what is the most merciful thing? Man, the most merciful thing is just to be resting in the grave until Jesus comes.
Yeah.
So, man, we gave these guys hugs, and I don't think I've ever cried so hard in my life, like, just because, you know, the feeling of knowing, like, man, they're so close, and yet I didn't come away with the expectation that I thought that I was going to come away with. You know, like, in my mind, it was like, I want to see people pulled out of that rubble alive, you know? And yet it didn't happen. And here we are in front of the building. The guy on the left, right here, in the black, right there, his name is Anya. That was his family that was in the building. And, I mean, just like big, bearded, burly Muslim guy. And dude, he just wept on my shoulder. You know, because he knew we had given everything we could give, humanly speaking. Like, we'd given everything we possibly could give. And what do you do when you come up short? What do you do when the answer is no?
You still trust.
You still trust. Just like Job says, though you slay me, I will trust you.
Yeah.
You know, I'll never forget, I had a friend that ran over his child in the driveway. And I was one of the first ones that they called to come to the house. And I distinctly remember driving over the whole way. I'm just praying in my mind. I'm just like, Lord, like, if now is the time to raise this child to life, it's now. Like, you've done it before. Like, why not now? You know? And man, I got to the house fully, like, just like in my mind thinking, Lord, you just have to say the word and this child will live.
Yeah.
You know? And I even went in the bedroom, shut the door, kept the family outside of the bedroom, and I just sat there with this child, this lifeless child. And I just said, God, please, like, if it's your will, give this child life?
Wow.
And the answer was no.
Wow.
And you look back on that and you think, is it because God doesn't care? And yet I remember holding the father in the bathroom, you know, as he's just in pain, like pain that you can't even like describe. He's just rocking back and forth just in pain. And there's nothing, what can you say? What can you say to a father who's run over their own child? Nothing. Like, what are you going to say that's going to comfort them? Nothing. And he's just in pain, and he's just sitting there, and he says, I want to do what it takes to see my kid again.
Oh, wow.
He's like, I want to do what it takes. He's like, I want to live a faithful life to God to see my kid again.
Wow.
And he had been on a track that had been leading him away from God. He had been on a track that had been drifting further and further away from God. And it was that signal tragedy moment that woke him up and brought him back onto that straight and narrow path in which he was now solidified. Do you think, he's going to remember that vow because that vow was paid for with the life of another.
Wow.
Greater love has no man than this, that he give his life for a friend. And it's no different in the principle in that situation where a child lost his life so that his parents would meet him in heaven.
Wow.
And it's no different, you know, in this situation as well. Like the impact that it made on Anya and his family. I wish I had the text messages here to show you. This is Anya here, the arrow, and his family. I texted him and I told him, I said, Anya, do you believe that Jesus could raise your family to life? And he was like, I believe.
Wow.
He's like, I believe. And we never gave him a Bible study. We never gave him a Bible study that Jesus has the keys to death. We never did any of that. All we did was demonstrate that we were willing to risk our lives to try to save his family. And in the end, he was like, I believe.
Wow.
And that's what it takes. Like in this day and age in which we live, like, man, people need to see a sermon more than they even need to hear a sermon.
Amen.
And the same thing with Octai, right? Like Octai here, he is, you know, with us. And this is what Octai says. This is the text message I actually got from Octai. Is he says, I love you too, my brother. He said, I will be chasing new miracles with you guys until my last breath. Thank you for your great heart.
Wow.
You know, it's just like, man, yeah, God got another one. He's got another worker for his kingdom. And Octai's mind is totally blown. He says, you know, I can't go back to my Muslim religion.
Wow.
He says, because I've seen something completely different in Christianity.
And this is the guy that you just met on the airplane at the beginning.
On the airplane in the beginning.
Oh, wow.
That was it. That was it. And it's so amazing. I wish I could tell you guys all the amazing things God is still doing to this day. Like they're building a memorial center and a training center there in Antioch as a result of this whole trip. They're gonna save some of those collapsed buildings and they're gonna turn it into a training center, a memorial center for those who lost their lives. And Octai is now leading the charge, like full on, like we're doing this. And he knows that it's for the purpose of sharing the gospel.
And that's you know, if that was the mission that sparked and initiated this kind of a ministry to then go and save in the next disaster or whatever, then you know that God had purpose with you being there. Even though by human standards, people would look at that and say, well, you know, you didn't save anybody. That would be a failed thing. Look at how not failed that is.
Yeah. It only makes sense to the spiritual mind. And we even had a subsequent trip immediately back where we sent a team immediately back there. Because the need was so great. And they had just another whole incredible, miraculous trip where God just led them step by step, person by person, connected with them a whole team of theology students from Istanbul who were asking questions about Bible prophecy and asking, it was amazing. Like God is so great. Like he can connect the dots like nobody else and blow us out of the water.
Amen.
And man, the fact is that we see these things happening. Jesus is coming soon. Like I know for a fact that these people who have lost their lives in events like this, they're not going to be resting in the grave long. Like it's not much time. And God's going to call them forth. Jesus is going to call them forth.
Amen.
You know, the voice of the archangel with a mighty trumpet, man, is going to call them out of the ground, and it's going to be an amazing day to see that day.
Amen.
So,
Brock, thank you for sharing this with us. I hope that you guys were all inspired by this story. Listen, if you want to get involved with a rescue mission, I mean, these guys have story after story after story like this. They need support. They need prayers. They need financial donations. These guys need resources. And if you think that this would be something that you'd like to investigate a little more, I hope you look up their ministry. What's the website?
GideonRescue.org.
GideonRescue.org, but keep them in your prayers because these guys literally are willing to risk their lives to share the gospel. I think it's something that we should all be doing. And Brock, it's always a pleasure to hear you tell these stories. And I'm proud of you as an older brother. I think it's awesome to know that you're out there on the front lines, and it's made a huge impact even on me. All right, thank you guys. Like this video, share it with someone that you may know, and we hope that you guys were immensely blessed. If you would like to subscribe to our channel, please do subscribe to our channel. That way, every time we have a new video come out, you will know about that video. But ultimately, keep our ministry in your prayers, and thank you all for your love and support. We'll see you next week. Few movies in the history of the world that have completely changed our world. And in 1999, a movie titled The Matrix hit the world stage.
These stories are often told and seen over and over again. Is it simply just to make money? Or is there something more nefarious behind it?
There has been very few movies in the history of the world that have completely changed our world. And in 1999, a movie titled The Matrix hit the world stage.
These stories are often told and seen over and over again. Is it simply just to make money? Or is there something more nefarious behind it?